At 1 o'clock in the morning, a mother put her 2-year-old son to bed. 10 hours later, she reported him missing. For 5 days, an entire city searched land, water, trash, and sky, believing they were racing to save a child. But investigators weren't chasing a disappearance. They were uncovering a crime that had already happened. This is the case of Noah Tomlin, and how a desperate search revealed a truth no one wanted to face. And the person responsible was speaking to police the entire time. If you're drawn to cases that expose the brutal truth behind closed doors, you're in the right place. I'm here to shine a light on the forgotten and the overlooked. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to Cold Case Beacon so you never miss a story that deserves to be heard. Hampton, Virginia, is a mid-sized city on the southeastern coast, part of the sprawling Hampton Roads metropolitan area. It's a place with deep historical roots, home to military bases, waterfronts, and quiet residential neighborhoods where families raise their children. It's not the kind of place where you expect a child to vanish without a trace. But on the morning of June 24, 2019, that's exactly what happened. At approximately 11:36 in the morning, Hampton police received a call from a woman named Julia Tomlin. She was 34 years old, a mother of multiple children, and she lived in a mobile home on Atlantic Avenue, near the Buckroe Beach area. Her voice was frantic. She told the dispatcher that her 2-year-old son, Noah, was missing. She said she had put him to bed around 1 o'clock that morning, and when she went to check on him later, he was gone. She claimed she had searched the house, the yard, the neighborhood, but there was no sign of him. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The mobile home was cordoned off immediately. Crime scene tape went up. Neighbors began to gather, whispering, wondering what had happened. Julia told police that Noah had been wearing a white and green pajama shirt and a diaper when she last saw him. She said the front door had been locked. She said she didn't know how he could have gotten out. But there was a problem. A significant problem. Julia claimed she had put Noah to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. She didn't report him missing until 11:36. That's more than 10 hours. 10 hours during which a 2-year-old child was allegedly missing, and no one called for help. When investigators asked Julia why she waited so long, her answers were vague. She said she thought he might be hiding. She said she kept looking. She said she didn't want to panic. But none of it made sense. A 2-year-old doesn't hide for 10 hours. A 2-year-old doesn't wander off and stay gone in silence. And any parent who truly believes their child is missing doesn't wait half a day to call the police. Still, at that moment, the priority was finding Noah alive. Hampton police immediately launched a full-scale search operation. Officers fanned out across the neighborhood, knocking on doors, checking yards, searching under porches and in sheds. K-9 units were brought in. The dogs picked up Noah's scent near the mobile home, but the trail disappeared quickly. It was as if the child had simply vanished into thin air. Neighbors were interviewed. One woman who knew Julia personally described her as a devoted mother, always with her kids, always doing activities with them. She said Julia had 3 children under the age of 5 and that she kept a close eye on them. She said the kids were never allowed off the porch without supervision, and that Julia had a gate that she locked to keep them safe. But not everyone saw it that way. As the search continued, other neighbors began to share different observations. Some said they rarely saw the children outside. Some said the home seemed chaotic. Some said they had concerns, but didn't know what to do about them. By the afternoon of June 24, the search had expanded. Helicopters circled overhead. Dive teams were called in to search nearby bodies of water. Volunteers from across the community showed up to help. Churches organized prayer vigils. Social media exploded with posts sharing Noah's photo, begging for information, pleading for his safe return. Hampton Police Chief Terry Sult held a press conference that evening. He stood in front of the mobile command center that had been set up near the scene and addressed the media. His tone was measured, but the concern was evident. "We have a missing child," he said. "A 2-year-old who has not been seen since 1 o'clock in the morning. We take these situations extraordinarily seriously. We are unable to locate the child after a number of searches, so we've called in additional resources. We're getting assistance from the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, the state police, and the FBI." He was asked if foul play was suspected. Chief Salt didn't rule anything out. "We're considering everything," he said. "From the child just walking away, though a 2-year-old shouldn't be able to walk too far, all the way up to and including foul play. We're looking at all potential possibilities." He was asked about the mother. He said she was cooperating with detectives. He didn't say more than that. But behind the scenes, investigators were already starting to piece together a very different picture. As the first day of the search came to a close, the command center remained active. Police dogs were sent home for the night, but officers continued working through the evening, reviewing evidence, conducting interviews, and planning the next day's efforts. Chief Salt told reporters that as soon as the sun came up, it would be all hands on deck. And it was. By the morning of June 25, more than 24 hours had passed since Noah was last seen. The search intensified. Additional agencies joined the effort. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team was brought in. The Virginia State Police provided their mobile command post. Fire departments from surrounding jurisdictions sent personnel and equipment. Dive teams searched the waters near Buckroe Beach. Aerial drones scanned the area from above. Volunteers combed through wooded areas and low-lying marshlands. But there was still no sign of Noah. Detectives began to focus more closely on the timeline. Julia had said she put Noah to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. That was an unusual time for a toddler to be going to sleep. When pressed, she couldn't provide a clear explanation for why he was up so late. She also couldn't explain why she waited so long to report him missing. Investigators started asking harder questions. They wanted to know who else had been in the home. They wanted to know if anyone had visited. They wanted to know if there had been any arguments, any conflicts, any unusual behavior in the days leading up to Noah's disappearance. Julia's answers remained inconsistent. Meanwhile, the search continued. Officers retraced their steps, checking and rechecking areas they had already covered. They searched trash dumpsters. They searched storm drains. They searched abandoned buildings. They worked with the city's public works department to isolate trash collection routes, making sure that nothing was transported to the landfill before it could be searched. By June 26, 48 hours after Noah was reported missing, the situation had become dire. No credible sightings. No new leads. No evidence that Noah had wandered away on his own. And no signs of an abduction. Chief Salt held another press conference. This time, his message was more somber. "Every minute that goes by is drastic," he said. "We're going to continue to check and recheck these areas. We're putting everything we have into locating this juvenile." He was asked about the parents. He said they had spent time at police headquarters overnight. He said investigators were working with them. But he didn't elaborate. Behind the scenes, the investigation was shifting. Detectives were no longer just searching for a missing child. They were building a case. On June 27, 3 days after Noah was reported missing, the search took a new and grim turn. Crews were deployed to the Bethel landfill in Hampton, about 10 miles from Noah's home. Officers in hazmat suits began the painstaking process of sifting through tons of garbage by hand. It was grueling, dangerous work. The smell was overwhelming. The conditions were brutal. But no one complained. Every officer knew what was at stake. At the same time, additional teams were sent to the Hampton NASA steam plant, a facility where some of the city's trash is incinerated and converted into renewable energy. It was a location that hadn't been considered until investigators started tracing the routes that trash from Noah's neighborhood would have taken after being collected. Chief Salt addressed the decision to search the landfill in a press conference that afternoon. He explained that the department had worked proactively to isolate trash, stopping collection in the area early on to prevent contamination of potential evidence. But he acknowledged that it was impossible to account for everything. "We've looked on land, in the water," he said. "We've checked trash, dumpsters, neighborhoods, houses, underneath buildings, in sheds. We've covered the area multiple times with different teams so that we would have different eyes checking the same locations repeatedly. Today, we have shifted our search efforts to the landfill." He was asked why the search wasn't continuing through the night. He explained that they didn't have the lighting necessary to safely search the landfill after dark, and that they were dependent on daylight to do the work properly. It was a logical answer, but it didn't satisfy everyone. People on social media demanded to know why every possible resource wasn't being used around the clock. They wanted answers. They wanted Noah found. And they wanted to believe he was still alive. But deep down, most people knew the truth. The longer a child is missing, the less likely it is that they'll be found alive. And Noah had been gone for 3 days. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. On June 28, 4 days after Noah was reported missing, the investigation took a major turn. Hampton police announced that they had made an arrest. Julia Tomlin, Noah's mother, was taken into custody and charged in connection with her son's disappearance. The charges were initially listed as pending, but Chief Salt made it clear that the investigation had reached a critical stage. He stood before the media, flanked by officers and agents from multiple agencies, and delivered the news that no one wanted to hear. "Unfortunately, to date, Noah has not been found," he said. "Based on the highly coordinated investigation we've conducted with local, state, and federal partners, we believe him to be deceased." The words hung in the air like a weight. Believed to be deceased. Not missing. Not lost. Deceased. Chief Salt continued. "This leaves us a little bit speechless, but the search for Noah continues. We'll never give up hope. We are intensifying our search efforts to find Noah with a more specific focus." He was asked what led to Julia's arrest. He said it was the result of old-fashioned police work, combined with the efforts of the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit and other investigative partners. He said detectives had been working around the clock, analyzing evidence, conducting interviews, and piecing together a timeline that didn't match Julia's story. He was asked what Julia had been charged with. He said the charges were pending and that more information would be released as it became available. He was asked where Julia was at that moment. He said she was inside the police station, being held for questioning. The news sent shockwaves through the community. People who had been praying for Noah's safe return now had to confront the possibility that he had been dead all along. And the person responsible wasn't a stranger. It was his own mother. Julia Tomlin appeared in court for the first time on the morning of June 29. She was brought into the courtroom in shackles, wearing a jail-issued jumpsuit. She spoke softly to the judge, barely audible, and became visibly emotional at times. But she didn't say much. The charges against her were now public. She was charged with 3 counts of felony child neglect. According to the arrest warrants, the neglect had occurred on June 22, 2 days before she reported Noah missing. That detail was significant. It meant that whatever had happened to Noah, it hadn't happened on June 24. It had happened earlier. And Julia had waited. She had waited 2 days before reporting her son missing, and by that time, he was already gone. The warrant stated that Julia had neglected 3 children, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old baby. The language was vague, but the implication was clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. When asked about the discrepancy in dates, Hampton police could only say that it spoke to the deeper elements of the investigation, and that they couldn't discuss it further. As Julia's case moved forward, more details about her past began to emerge. Court records showed that she had been found guilty of child neglect once before, back in 2010. According to a criminal complaint from that case, Julia had told a detective that she had sat her 1-year-old daughter on a stove. She claimed that moments later, the child fell and landed on the stove, suffering severe burn marks on her back. Both Julia and the child's father admitted that they never took the girl to the hospital. It was a disturbing revelation. And it raised an obvious question: how had Julia been allowed to keep custody of her children after that? The answer, like so many things in this case, was complicated. The child welfare system is overburdened, underfunded, and often unable to keep up with the volume of cases it handles. Children slip through the cracks. Warnings are ignored. And sometimes, the consequences are fatal. While Julia sat in jail, the search for Noah continued. Officers were still combing through the landfill, still searching the steam plant, still hoping to find his body so that his family could have some form of closure. On July 2, 2019, that hope was realized, but not in the way anyone wanted. At 8:50 in the morning, a search team working inside the Hampton NASA steam plant made a discovery. Buried beneath layers of incinerated trash and debris, they found the remains of a child. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but investigators believed it was Noah. Chief Salt held another press conference. His voice was steady, but the emotion was unmistakable. "It's with very mixed emotions that we report today that our goal has been accomplished," he said. At 8:50 a.m. this morning, a search team located the remains of a child we believe to be Noah Tomlin. He explained that the remains would be sent to the medical examiner's office for formal identification and autopsy. He thanked the officers, agents, and volunteers who had spent more than 10,000 man-hours searching for Noah. He said they had gone through more than 1,000 tons, 2 million pounds, of garbage by hand. "The priority all along has been to find Noah," he said. "And today, that goal has been accomplished." But finding Noah's body was only the beginning. Now, investigators needed to determine how he died. And more importantly, who was responsible. The autopsy results were devastating. According to the medical examiner's report, Noah Tomlin had died from blunt force trauma to the head. But the injuries didn't stop there. The report revealed that Noah had suffered multiple fractures to his skull, his jaw, and his ribs. Some of the injuries were old, indicating that he had been abused over a prolonged period of time. The abuse had been so severe that his bones had stopped growing. An anthropology report provided additional context. It stated that the pattern of injuries was consistent with a child who had fallen several stories from a building. But Noah hadn't fallen. He had been beaten. Repeatedly. Over weeks or months. And no one had stopped it. Commonwealth's attorney Anton Bell, the lead prosecutor on the case, didn't mince words when describing the evidence. "There is no question in my mind, based on the evidence, that this child was tortured," he said. He went on to explain that the level of trauma Noah endured was beyond comprehension. The child had been living in a state of constant pain and fear. And the person who should have protected him, his mother, was the one inflicting the harm. With the autopsy results in hand, prosecutors moved forward with additional charges. Julia Tomlin was now facing murder. Julia's preliminary hearing took place several months later. 14 witnesses were called to testify, each providing pieces of the puzzle that investigators had been assembling since the day Noah was reported missing. One of the witnesses was a man named Brad Bailey. He testified that he was the father of one of Julia's children, though not Noah. He said that on June 22, 2 days before Noah was reported missing, Julia had called him repeatedly, asking for help. She told him she needed to clean her house because Child Protective Services might be coming. Bailey said he went to her home that afternoon, around 1 to 1:30 in the afternoon. He said Noah was alive at that time, playing in the living room. "My focus wasn't on Noah, but he was there," Bailey testified. A few hours later, another man named Brian Null went to Julia's home. He testified that there was some question about whether he might be Noah's biological father, and he wanted his daughter to meet Noah. But when he arrived, Julia wouldn't let him see the child. She said Noah was asleep. Noel asked if he and his daughter could just peek in, promising not to wake him. Julia refused. She insisted that Noah was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. It was a lie. By that time, Noah was already dead. Investigators presented additional evidence during the hearing. Crime scene photos showed blood stains on the walls of Julia's home. The stains had been cleaned, but forensic testing revealed traces of blood that matched Noah's DNA. A shirt found in the home also tested positive for Noah's blood. An FBI agent testified that Julia had eventually confessed to what happened. According to the agent, Julia said that Noah died while taking an unattended bath. She claimed he hit his head and drowned. But instead of calling for help, she put him in his bed. Later, she placed his body in a diaper box and had a friend dispose of it in the trash. The medical examiner's findings contradicted Julia's story. The injuries Noah sustained were not consistent with a bathtub accident. They were consistent with prolonged, intentional abuse. One of the officers who found Noah's remains testified about the condition of the body. He said the smell and the sight were so overwhelming that he had to leave the scene to vomit. Only Noah's liver and one of his legs were recognizable. The rest of his body had decomposed beyond identification. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge ruled that there was enough probable cause to certify the charges to a grand jury. The defense filed motions to dismiss some of the charges, but the judge overruled them. Julia Tomlin would stand trial for the murder of her son. But the trial never happened. On the morning Julia was scheduled to appear in court, she accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, child abuse and neglect, and concealment of a body. The judge sentenced her to 55 years in prison. 40 years for second-degree murder. 10 years for felony child neglect. 5 years for concealing a body. None of the time was suspended. Julia Tomlin would spend the rest of her life behind bars. During the sentencing hearing, Julia's 19-year-old daughter took the stand. She was one of Julia's 10 children, and she had lived through years of abuse herself. She broke down as she described the horror she and her siblings endured. She said their mother physically and mentally abused all of them. But Noah, she said, got the worst of it. You're supposed to be the protector as a parent, she said through tears. Not the predator. Commonwealth's attorney Anton Bell echoed that sentiment in his closing remarks. This is someone who was brutalized, he said. This is someone who was tortured. You don't torture someone and then say, "Oh, I'm remorseful that I tortured you." No, you're remorseful that you got caught. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. It's heart-wrenching that he had to die, and it's heart-wrenching that he had to suffer the way he did. But at the end of the day, death was a welcome friend, because this kid had gone through the worst of the worst. Julia stood emotionless as the judge handed down the sentence. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and she never looked back. After Julia was sentenced, Noah's family on his father's side came forward. They had only met Noah once, just days before he was reported missing. Family conflict had kept them apart, but they had been trying to reconnect. They had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. Noah's grandparents, Vincent and Cindy Jones, sat down for an interview. They spoke about the brief time they spent with him, how sweet he was, how much they wished they had known him better. I was shocked when I heard the news, Vincent said. But the more we looked at it, the more I knew she was involved somehow. Cindy wiped away tears. The system failed Noah, she said. The system did fail Noah. They now have custody of 3 of Julia's other children, including Noah's older sister, Lyanna. She's still processing everything that happened, the loss of her brother, the betrayal by her mother, the trauma that will follow her for the rest of her life. I just try to think about the positive parts, Lyanna said quietly. Like, Noah's no longer suffering. The system did fail Noah Tomlin. That much is undeniable. Julia Tomlin had a documented history of child abuse. She had been convicted of neglect before. Child Protective Services had been involved with her family multiple times. And yet, Noah remained in her care. He remained in a home where he was being beaten, starved, and tortured. How does that happen? How does a child fall through every safety net designed to protect him? The answer is complex, but it boils down to a few brutal realities. The child welfare system is overwhelmed. Caseworkers are overworked and underpaid. Resources are scarce. And the legal threshold for removing a child from a home is high, often too high. In Noah's case, the warning signs were there. But no one acted in time. After Julia's sentencing, advocates and lawmakers called for reform. They demanded better training for caseworkers, more funding for child protective services, and stronger penalties for repeat offenders. Some progress has been made. But for Noah, it came too late. Today, Noah Tomlin's story serves as a painful reminder of what can happen when the system fails. His life was short, brutal, and filled with suffering. But his death was not in vain. His case exposed the cracks in the system. It forced people to confront uncomfortable truths. And it inspired change, however slow that change may be. Noah's family continues to honor his memory. They speak out about child abuse. They advocate for stronger protections. And they refuse to let his story be forgotten. Because Noah Tomlin deserved better. He deserved to be safe. He deserved to be loved. And he deserved to live. If this case affected you the way it affected me, I need you to do something. Subscribe to Cold Case Beacon. Share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. These stories matter. These victims matter. And the more people who hear them, the harder it becomes to ignore the systems that failed them. Noah Tomlin's name will not be forgotten. Not here. Not ever. Thank you for watching. And please, stay vigilant. Stay informed. And never stop asking questions.